In this video, I'm going to unbox my Oxford PhD diploma. Now, if you've watched my previous video, which I'll put up here on my graduation, I actually shared my, unboxing of my diploma to begin with. But apparently, after some back and forth and I was like looking at some of the details, I realized that, hey, wait a second. They got my diploma name wrong, like the name of my thesis wrong. And so that video, it feels incomplete to me. So I wrote Oxford, their diploma people, and I'm like, yo, you got my diploma wrong. And so they sent me another one. So I guess that means I got 2 official Oxford diplomas. So in this video, what's gonna happen is, number 1, I'm gonna unbox the diploma and the frame, put it together and show it to you. And then the second part is gonna be some reflections on my journey at Oxford and what are some of the big lessons that I learned along the way from my PhD. So if that's what interests you, then stick around, or if you're not interested in certain parts of it, just go in the description below and jump to different parts of the video to get what you want. All right? Here's 2 diplomas. This is the one that I got on my graduation day, pretty much, just my name, DPhil sociology, right? And just so you know, I am a sociologist, but I look at the sociology of emotions, so it's basically a social psychology, like right at the edges of sociology and psychology. That's why I talk a lot about sociology. I also talk a lot about psych. So here we go. I'm officially opening an Oxford diploma. I did it in the past. It's kind of like second time, a year after graduating, and it's like, not that big of a deal, but for drama. So here we go, the official diploma with the right name. Actually, I haven't verified that yet. Let me verify. Yeah, social solidarity among Chinese Canadian evangelicals in short-term missions. I looked at the sociology of emotions, right? Frames here came on DHL just several days ago. Things are kind of shaky in there. I wonder if it actually came, like, it's in fragile box, but everything's like shaking around. And I got this from universityframes.co.uk. Company is called Graduation Attire Limited. Right, so here's the frame. By the way, if you're wondering, that frame I have up there, I'm just gonna tilt the camera up. That frame I have up there, it's from my University of Pennsylvania master's degree. It's a very big frame, and I got the whole Ivy League thing behind it. That makes it like, quite an overkill, to be honest. And like all the Oxford frames I was able to find online, they were much smaller than this frame I have up there. So, with that being the anchor, it actually becomes quite hard to find anything that's like, kind of fitting the expectation. At the same time, this one's like my terminal degree, so that's actually, kind of strange to have a master's degree frame bigger than your PhD frame, but. All right. So here's the frame. Nice and simple, actually very simple. The back, just a little string attached to hang it. And there's actually a mat attachment to the back, which is like, right here, right? There's this extra piece of plexiglass plastic thing here. I'm not sure what it's for. Just very simple cardboard. There's really no texture around it, and they charge like an extra £5 for it. So there were other options in the US that I could have gotten, but I didn't get them because it was like, around £100, like shipping and everything included. While the other one, if I was to get one from the US, it's not designed for a vertical Oxford diploma, and at the same time, it's gonna cost like $300–400. And since I got 2 diplomas, I might as well, worst case scenarios, get that one. I'm actually waiting for Oxford University's official one. I bought 2 for my friends, for their graduations several years ago. But when I was graduating, the official Oxford frame was nowhere to be found in the Oxford University shop. And when I asked, I was like, hey, you guys got frames? And they're like, yeah, we're working on it. And they've been working on it for the last few years. I have no idea what's up. But it's basically not cool. There's like a huge opportunity to leech more money off of your students, but they're not doing it because they couldn't find a good supplier, or whatever that means. Put this piece in. My official diploma. And that's it. That's how you frame an Oxford PhD diploma. Using an unofficial Oxford frame, because Oxford doesn't have their own official frame out. and it is what it is. But here we go, right? So I'm just gonna compare it to like the back. It's this size, right? Here's the biggest frame that I could find for Oxford. This size. I mean, just compare it. It's like my master's is more bigger and pompous and obnoxious than my PhD. I mean, it's gonna be hanging on the wall. It is what it is, and I'm perfectly fine with it. It's not a bad frame by any means. It gets the job done, but compared to the one that I get at the official like University of Pennsylvania store, there's a way to go. I guess it's not fair to use that as the anchor, but it is what it is, right? So overall, the frame is light. It is, you know, it does feel, it smells like real wood. And overall, you know, the make is pretty solid as well. It is light. Let's talk about this frame, right? Let's talk about the process of getting what was inside this diploma. Does this paper even really matter? And to be honest, I don't think it really matters. It's a piece of paper. It doesn't really mean much other than, you know, commemorating you got that journey. You know, I went through that journey and I was able to complete my PhD. So having framed my diploma, and you know, it's kind of like 1 year now since my graduation. I actually did my graduation ceremony back in 2019, November the 9th. And my graduation letter was received on August. So that was kind of like my official, like, you know, you can start calling yourself a PhD now. So there's several things I want to reflect upon and, you know, just really share openly in this video. The first lesson that I really learned from this whole PhD process at Oxford is that you're always in a process of critical self-examination, and essentially research is kind of like life, right? You know, a lot of times people think like, oh, research is, you know, done in a lab or done, you know, in an ethnographic setting out there somewhere studying some groups of people. But you're constantly re-examining life, and that's what I've really learned. My PhD really began, if you know, read the title of my diploma, I looked at short-term mission trips from Chinese Canadian churches going to China. And along the way, they used Hong Kong as a stop. So just looking at how young people and older people in overseas Chinese Canadian communities made sense of their Chineseness and their faith, and how they use, you know, faith as a parenting tool to teach the next generation about religion and about Chineseness, right? So that was really what I was looking at. At least that's what I thought I was looking at the very beginning. And so the whole idea was to contrast this phenomenon of short-term missions, of mission trips to China, and contrast it to ideas of you know, post-colonialism and co-ethnic transnational religious activism. And what that means is basically looking at Chinese people going to do Christian things, and because Christianity isn't necessarily a Chinese religion to begin with. You know, if you're thinking about Chinese religions, you'll typically think of Buddhism or Taoism or Confucianism if you classify that as religion, right? But anyways, you know, a lot of Christian Chinese people going over to China and doing stuff. But over time, I realized that that wasn't really what I was looking at. Over time, I realized I was actually researching what we call social solidarity, so community and the sense of belonging amongst people. That's kind of typical in the sociological approach, where you start looking at one, you know, group of people and how they behave, and you extrapolate those mechanisms. And so in classical sociology, you gotta think of it kind of like, you know, there are different pieces that are moving that you can see in one group of people, and you can more or less extrapolate those pieces upon other groups of people, and you understand how society works. And one of the basic, you know, interests of sociology is looking at how people behave in modernity, right? Modern society, because that's really when sociology really began. Looking at the classical works of Max Weber, of Emil Durkheim, and Karl Marx, and so on, different streams of sociology. And looking at the different mechanisms at play, and then seeing how it works in different settings. So eventually I figured out, you know, I'm looking at this group of people because most of the time you look at people who are similar to yourself. So I did grow up in Canada. I am Christian, I am Chinese, and I'm looking at how these people practice this to make meaning of their identity. So that's kind of like how my approach was. And this whole journey was an interesting journey because I really traveled growing up in a Chinese evangelical household. If you're looking at, you know, political spectrums or social beliefs, I really began, you know, more on the right side, right? Evangelical is conservative, and Chinese culture is typically conservative as well. So it began on the right. And then slowly, over time, because I studied education, I taught in education for a long time, and also got my master's at Penn, I moved very much to the left. in terms of my worldview, because education is very left-leaning, and so is Penn as a university, especially at School of Education. Kind of I went from one end of the spectrum to the other end of the spectrum, appreciating both sides, right? Understanding kind of the worlds that, you know, they live in and how these worlds can collide. I think going to Oxford, one of the things that made a big difference for me was how Oxford was really very center in terms of their orientation, in terms of the sociology. So the department itself is actually very center right leaning in terms of they want to approach sociology as very much more of a hard science rather than sociology as a form of activism or challenging the norms and so on, which is very much more on the left-leaning American side of sociology. And that really challenged me. That really actually shocked my system. When I first submitted my first proposal for my Oxford PhD, what happened was it was torn apart because I was writing stuff from the perspective of educational social scientific scholarship. And once it went in there, it was like just torn apart. It wasn't really scientific enough. The whole perspective and the whole point of departure was off from at least what they considered as sound sociology. And, you know, it was a challenge. And I would say this was a kind of like a really what I mean by critical self-examination, where you really need to examine like, hey, am I, you know, is it me? Did I write something wrong? I mean, like, because that was reality for me. But being challenged in that reality really pushed me out of my comfort zone to reevaluate different perspectives. And I guess that's one of the lessons that you really take away. When you're doing a PhD, you can always be wrong. There's always room for mistake, and there's always room for critical self-examination and further improvement. I thought I was pretty self-critical and self-reflective before going in. I aced pretty much both my masters. And, you know, I could have aced my undergrad, but I was playing, you know, basketball and soccer and video games and music, you know, instead. But for my master's, it was kind of like I was one of those late bloomers. I was getting A pluses across the board for my master's. And for my PhD, I thought, oh, it's going to be the same. But then I was in for a surprise, and pretty much I failed 2.5 times. I think I mentioned that in the past videos. But throughout this process, I moved from looking at, hey, this group of people who are doing, you know, missions, and then just being able to blow it up to look at bigger themes. And so looking at the social psychology of emotions and what makes people tick and have a sense of belonging and solidarity. And I think during the time, there were several big movements, right? The left was moving further left in terms of the political spectrum. The pushback of the right in terms of Trump winning in 2016 had a big impact on the pivot in the research interests, given the increased political polarization that we were seeing in society. And so that's why I was looking at solidarity, and that's why my theme was basically solidarity. And I've never really tied myself to any particular ideology. In fact, like, I hate ideology because there's always going to be structural flaws and everything. And I've gotten into the habit of really examining every issue independently and, you know, thinking the unit of analysis is always the individual, right? And so always, you know, look at individual cases and trying to connect it to others and see it makes sense of it in a new way, in different ways. And kind of goes back to the whole idea of, you know, in psychology, there's the idea of there's central ideas, central themes in your brain that, you know, that really form your worldview, and there's peripheral ideas. You can move those peripheral ideas around, you can keep challenging them, and it's important. But when you have enough peripheral ideas that need to be challenged and that needs to be moved, to the extent that a core central idea needs to be moved, essentially your whole worldview will shift as well. And so for me, the several years I spent at Oxford was pretty much a whole process of moving these central ideas around so I could make new meaning out of the world. Which brings me to my next point. Another major lesson that I learned in Oxford is taking feedback. And being able to take feedback is incredible in terms of your self-growth. So yesterday, my daughter was writing a paper on World War I. She's like 9 years old. We homeschool her now, and I'm a history teacher by training. So I was, you know, that's one of the things that I'm directing her to do and just working with her. And she was writing her second draft of that paper, but she didn't implement the changes that we recommended, the feedback that we recommended on the first draft. And after writing her second draft, my wife reviewed it, right? Because homeschool right now, the parent is the teacher. And it's like, no, you didn't implement any of the changes that we recommended. And so my daughter started crying. So it was like 1.5 pages of single space handwriting, right? And so when she was crying, I heard her, I went downstairs and I hugged her and I told her, you know what? Daddy's got some friends who were at Oxford who got some feedback from their assessors, but they never changed. And as a result, they went to their examination a second time and they failed the second time. And as a result, you know, they had to pack up and leave. Or there were cases where they had to change the examiners or whatever. So you hear these stories when you're a PhD student of people who make it, people who don't make it, and people who, you know, try to figure out their way to making it. And I told my daughter, it's like, you know, either you learn to take feedback now, or in the future when you get your master's or you get your PhD or you get whatever. I'm not one of those tiger parents that like forces my kid to pursue like the craziest degree possible kind of thing. But you know, there is the process of feedback, and not incorporating it will hurt you. So I told her this is an important lesson to learn at this point in your life rather than in the future. And you know, thinking back about my own work at Oxford, as much as some of the feedback hurt and some of the feedback I really didn't enjoy it, because it basically required me to go back and take out some of the core ideas and pretty much redo the whole process, right? It's not easy stuff. And thinking back to some of the lessons that I learned and like going back and just restructuring my whole PhD and changing core ideas, and whenever you change a core idea, all the peripheral ideas gotta change. I failed, like I said, 2.5 times. The half time is because the end was a major corrections, and you know, when you get major corrections, you can fail if you submit a second time, if they don't really like it or if you're like too far off the mark. But basically, through this process of constant challenge and refinement, it's kind of like you get rid of the impurities of your analysis or of your thinking through a process of constant refinement of like when you throw a metal ore into the fire and you beat that ore, you beat out all of its impurities. The process is painful, but during the process of, you know, constantly beating that ore, you get rid of all the impurities and you get the finest thing ever. And so I guess I'm pretty fine right now as a piece of metal. The third lesson I would say is grit, right? Grit is super important. Doing excellent work at the highest level of academia is like amazingly hard. And I don't think I did great work. I think I only did like good work, and you'll get cross-examined by experts who are as incisive as they come in their analysis, right? And like I said, I failed many times, but being able to hold them off in my final defense is a feat upon itself. And I think one of the keys to it is like, you know, not only do you recognize the strengths of what you do and, you know, your argument, but also recognize the limitations and, you know, the claims that you're not making. So what claims are you making? What claims are you not making? And that actually is a process of just being really clear in your thinking and your analysis. And it actually creates a real disconnect in the world that I'm living in now, because sometimes when I talk to people, you know, there are claims I'm making, there are claims I'm not making, and sometimes people will automatically think because I said X, they'll automatically relate me to Y and Z, and that's simply not the case, right? And that's how stereotypes happen, that's how misunderstandings happen, and that's why I'm, you know, constantly doing this kind of work in terms of improving my soft skills, improving my communication skills, so that I'm really able to convey what I'm truly trying to say. And in this video, I may not even be doing a good job right now. And it's a process of refinement and a process of practicing. To this day, I'm very proud of the fact that I'm the only one in the world who knows about my topic more than anyone else. And I have this diagram here, which I'll put on, you know, fill up the whole screen right now. And it's pretty much like the process of how a PhD student is really all you do after all those years of studying one single topic. What you end up with is just like pushing a little bit further in terms of the world's depository of knowledge. Now my PhD thesis is deposited in the University of Oxford's Bodleian Archives for DPhil manuscripts, along with some of the greatest thinkers, writers, and everythingers of all time, right? And you know, here I am doing YouTube videos. Not that there's anything, you know, bad about doing YouTube videos, you know, and there's something to be said about, you know, my stuff being placed right next to Aldous Huxley's in the University of Oxford's library, right? I mean, manuscript. And so, yeah, so just the thought of that, even to this day, is kind of mind-blowing for me. I haven't exactly wrapped my head around that. One of the things I really learned is you really have to have a lot of grit to really grind through this process, to really be able to do what you set out to do, right? And I did this with my 3 kids and my wife in tow. Super proud of it. They obviously paid a high price for it in terms of, you know, their sacrifice and not being able to, you know, grow up in stability where dad is able to consistently bring bread home, in terms of, you know, because while you're a PhD student, it's hard to have consistent income, right? You're giving up a lot of opportunity costs to pursue this. And so there is a lot of sacrifice involved. But this process took 5 to 6 years. It's over with. But I think if anything, this really taught me grit is key. You just can't give up. You just got to keep grinding. And that's really one thing you learn is like, life is a grind in itself. And my fourth and final lesson is, what we call the Dunning-Kruger Effect, right? And to this day, this is basically what I feel on a constant basis. And learning about the Dunning-Kruger Effect really helped me to learn about, what I know and how I should make use of my knowledge. And so the Dunning-Kruger Effect, for those of you who don't know it, is people who know a lot feel like they know very little. And people who know very little feel like they know a lot. It's kind of like when you think of a circle, right? If you know a lot in that circle, what happens is the borders of the circle is immense and you feel like there's a lot you don't know. If you don't know a lot and you think your knowledge of circle is like only like, this big, then pretty much what you feel like you don't know is only this much. And so as you get older, you become more humble and you become more understanding of the limitations of your knowledge. But at the same time, not everyone appreciates that, right? Not everyone went to school for 6 years and all they did was study and research people and study different perspectives of people. And yet, they're all, once we're on social media or especially Twitter or anywhere else in the world making YouTube videos or whatnot, we're all on equal footing. So, there is a humility in the process where you have to learn. There's a patience you have to learn. And I think that's really one of the things that you learn as a PhD is like, you learn to be humble about the knowledge that you have. But at the same time, the opposite end of that is you need to learn how to contribute as a member of society with, the knowledge that you have. And that's kind of like my approach in the sense that I'll be eternally cursed with the fact that, I have, a little more knowledge than the average person on sociology, on people, on psychology, than the average person, right? Everyone's got their expertise and so on. But at the same time, I always have to be humble and really be ready to learn more. And I think humility is another major lesson that you learn while doing your PhD. And even to this day, right, sure, I studied like, 6-7 years of my life on my graduate school studies at Penn and Oxford. But to this day, my mom still thinks she knows better than me on how to educate my kids, my own kids, even when I have 3 graduate degrees and like 3 degrees in education and 1 PhD on the social psychology of emotions. She's probably chuckling at this time as she's watching this video. And I guess this is also one of the reasons why I'm recording and depositing all my knowledge that I've synthesized over the years. And as I continue to learn in these videos that I have on YouTube, like I don't really like writing. I can write. But this is much more organic and natural to me. I'm just speaking to the camera. And at the same time though, there's a permanence to this, which I feel like I can be held accountable to for the future as I look upon my journey 10, 15 years from now, right? And it's always amazing, when you look at some of the stuff that you've made in the past, it's actually quite mind-blowing. So I produced music in the past, I produced like CDs in the past, and now my kids are blaring my old band's CDs. Like we've created 4 albums and they're playing it quite often. And it's really interesting to just listen to your own music from many years ago with new ears. And it's kind of like reading your own journal and just evaluating the changes within yourself. So that's why I'm going to continue to make these YouTube videos. Of course, it's part of my career coaching work as well. And that's it. That's my unboxing of my diploma and PhD journey, which I really feel now is really coming to a close now that I've framed the thing. I hope you enjoyed this video. Hit the like, click the subscribe button if you really liked it. Share with your friends and network if you enjoyed it. And I hope to see you in my future videos. Take care.